I'm joined by Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass of California, who's on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Peter Baker is chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. John Brennan is the former director of the CIA. Congresswoman, I guess it looks like that the Republicans around the president, those who like him, don't like him, whatever, for whatever reason are getting crazy, like he is. They're beginning to do things like that stunt today because they can't win the argument anymore. He's been caught. Your thoughts?
Well, I actually think, I mean, I know that they shared it with him last night that they were going to do that, but I also think that they did that in response to his rhetoric saying that they weren't defending him enough. So when I saw the antics, I just thought that they were marching to his orders. And I think it really was an act of desperation. They are not going to be able to stop the truth from coming out. I think it's really like a dam is breaking right now, and it's just important that we hear from all of the witnesses so that we can have a clear picture of the damage that's been done to our democracy.
Well, Congresswoman, the hearings that are being held to get information from top people like Bill Taylor yesterday are all bipartisan. There's Republicans in every one of those rooms. It's not like there's something sneaky going on. But these people in this sort of Brooks Brothers, this reminds me of 2000 in a recount, another Brooks Brothers protest showing up like, it reminds me of like a 1930s panty raid or something. It's so ridiculous. It's just a bunch of grown men acting like they're into hijinks. What a boring-looking group, by the way. Your thoughts?
It was actually embarrassing, but I do have to tell you, and Chris, you know this, if you add the number of Republicans from 3 committees, Intel, Oversight and Reform, and Foreign Affairs, you're talking about a large number of Republicans. So it is not like they have not been involved, that they haven't had complete access to everything. They just want us to have everything in the open right now so that the witnesses can coordinate their testimony and be bullied by the White House, and we're not going to do that.
Let me go to Peter Baker on this, because you write the main bar, the big piece in the Times, and I want to ask you about this. It seems to me that that Baltz of the Washington Post Dan Baltz has written a pretty solid statement. It's not analysis, it's a statement that it's now clear on the record that the President of the United States conditioned U.S. military assistance to Zelensky's government in Ukraine, who are facing the Russian tanks, on him providing some sort of declaration that he's going after Joe Biden. My question is, what's left to argue about?
Yeah, I think that Dan Baltz gets it spot on, as he always does. I mean, when you get Dan, who's about as measured a journalist out there, making such a definitive statement, it does tell you that something has changed in the debate. And I think he's right that basically the question now is, what do we make of this fact set that we have in front of us? What do we make of what the president and his people have done in terms of Ukraine? Is it important enough? Is it defensible? And the storming of the barricades, as you were today, in terms of the basement, shows that the Republican argument right now is one on process. When they don't want to defend what the president has done in terms of Ukraine, partly because they may not be 100% sure that all the facts are out there and don't want to get caught out, but also because it's very hard to argue at this point. So they focus on process, that the Democrats aren't being fair. It's not that different in some ways than in 1998, when the Democrats focused on process when they were defending against President Clinton's impeachment. They didn't want to be seen as excusing his conduct, so rather than defending his conduct, they said the other side is handling this bad. It's a way of making it a partisan affair, us versus them. They're treating us badly, therefore you have to be with us. It worked to some extent for President Clinton. That impeachment was a party line impeachment. That's the goal President Trump has here, too. Keep Republicans on his side, make sure it's a party line debate. As long as it's a party line debate, then he wins if it gets to the Senate.
You know, John Brennan, thank you for coming on tonight. It seems to me that you're a public servant for life, and it seems to me that what Trump does, every time you have a really good witness like Bill Taylor yesterday, who was our head of mission in Kiev, who testifies very forthrightly in a beautifully developed argument about how he discovered there was this other force out there led by Giuliani and the president to use this leverage we have with this desperate country, militarily desperate country facing Russia. When he realized that was going on, he's finally come out and put it to the public, gave it to the public. It just seems to me that Trump's last gasp is to say, he referred today, for example, as all Republicans who don't like him as human scum. Yeah. This is the President of the United States talking. He trashes every individual who speaks against him.
That's why I find it very heartening that it's national security.
You called him scum, human scum, that guy.
Yeah, it's national security professionals, our diplomats, like Bill Taylor, like Ambassador Yovanovitch, like Laura Cooper from the Department of Defense, like the whistleblower from the intelligence community somewhere, who are standing up and speaking out against Donald Trump. It is very heartening to those of us who did serve in a national security environment for so many years. And so therefore, I think he has to resort to these name-calling tactics because their professionalism, their expertise, their experience, I think, really lends great weight to the substantive argument that Donald Trump engaged in extortion, bribery with the Ukrainians.
Let me go back to Peter on this, because I think this language is something that, again, you and I have been, I do have some experience in American political life all these years, and calling people scum is kind of like the worst street corner lingo. And you're talking about Republicans, including Bill Taylor, who served, he's not in this for the money like Trump's in for the money almost all the time, if not all the time. This guy's in it for public service, and because he told the truth, he's human. Who comes up with these phrases? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you know, no, you're right. No other president in modern times, anyway, used this kind of language repeatedly and as extensively and as viscerally as this one does. He talks like a playground, you know, combatant. He's not. He doesn't speak in presidential tones. In fact, the other day in Dallas at a rally that he gave down there, he mocked the very idea of being presidential. So the idea that he uses terms like human scum and other very incendiary phrases, that's part and parcel of his style and his approach to the presidency. Definitely is a turnoff to people who remember other presidents who behaved in a more you know, in a more unifying way, or even when they conducted fierce debates, did so in a higher tone. This is not the way he rolls. It's not the way he operates, and it has worked for him as he sees it, so he's going to keep it up. But it's a very different way of looking at the presidency than we've seen by Republicans and Democrats going back. And I think it's really hard to make Bill Taylor into a radical, unelected bureaucrat, which is the phrase the White House used last night to describe him. He's given 50 years of his life to this country, went to West Point, served in Vietnam, was appointed, you know, first to ambassador to Ukraine by George W. Bush, served under Ronald Reagan, Republicans, Democrats. He's not, you know, a radical partisan. He's somebody who has believed in the service of his country in diplomatic and other forms. So it's hard to radicalize him or hard to demonize him, but that's what President Trump tries to do.
Just to make the point, you use terms like human scum to justify genocide. You use human scum, the phrases like that, to justify totalitarian behavior against your political enemies. Anything goes. It legalizes to people. It licenses people to do the worst possible things. When presidents, leaders of a country uses terms like that, this is frightening. Anyway, Trump's now making the argument that he didn't engage in a quid pro quo because, as he says, Ukraine didn't realize they were being leveraged. They were being, it's outrageous. Quoting Republican Congressman John Ratcliffe, Trump today claimed that neither Taylor or any other witness has provided testimony that the Ukrainians were aware that military aid was being withheld. You can't have a quid pro quo without a quo. Well, but there's ample evidence the Ukrainians did know they weren't getting the aid they expected. In fact, Ambassador Taylor testified that quid pro quo was spelled out explicitly to a top Ukrainian official in September on the 1st. Congresswoman, this president is so desperate and so reaching around for BS excuses for what he did. I sometimes wonder, didn't he say it would be okay to be impeached? He could use that to get reelected with? He clearly now will do anything to avoid what's coming his way in the next couple months.
Well, absolutely, and he clearly didn't understand or believe that it would ever happen. But I will tell you, when I sat in that room yesterday listening to the ambassador, you felt like you were in the presence of a true patriot. He had been very clear. He told Secretary Pompeo, I don't want to go to Ukraine unless the policy is going to be consistent. So they were forewarned, and they went and they asked him to go anyway, and he went out of his patriotic duty, even though he knew what happened to the previous ambassador. So he is somebody that we need to recognize in the future. And I think it is so sad and such a tragedy for all of us. You know, I travel a lot because I'm on foreign affairs, and every time I go to another country, I have to go to an embassy and try to lift their spirits because they are so demoralized from having their commander-in-chief constantly humiliate and denigrate their work and their service to our country.
Well, John Brennan, it seems to me they're making great witnesses.
Well, they are.
Yeah, they are.
And I think all Americans should be proud of these individuals who are willing to stand up. And I just wish some of the members of Congress who are still ardent supporters of Mr. Trump would have the courage, would have the spine, would have the honesty to do what these professionals are doing. And it's very unfortunate that Trump's defenders continue to try to explain away his misdeeds and, again, focus on the process right now. And they are really quite hypocritical also, because this was the process that the Republicans had during the Benghazi hearings. And it does make a lot of sense to be able to do these things without the glaring lights of the TV cameras. So I'm just very pleased that the people now are starting to listen to those professionals who can expose the activities and the actions of Mr. Trump.
Well, being increasingly, obviously, in the historic role of as a totalitarian, which is what he is, a man who will lead his country all by himself with no staff around. We're going to get to this later in the show. There's no loop with Trump. There's no people around him. There's no council of war. He does everything he feels like doing at that moment. But what he resents are people like you, John Brennan. He apparently has an obsession with you. Well, do you sense that?
Well, he can be obsessed with me if he likes. He's a badly broken person who has really done a great disservice, not just to this country, but to our world, in terms of how he has been so irresponsible and reckless and self-centered in the conduct of the presidency. And therefore, I believe that there is more than a legitimate basis right now to impeach this individual and also to remove him from office. I am just hoping that more and more Republicans will find the courage, will find the spine to be able to speak out against what truly is such a dangerous aberration of our great republic.
I hope they're listening. Thank you. You, as Congresswoman Karen Bass, I like all of you speak. By the way, all four of you people, the Cicilline and you and Hakeem and Sherry, I think you're great. I think just keep speaking out for the leadership of the House. I think you got to get on TV all the time. Thank you so much, Karen Bass of California on Foreign Affairs.